Another weekend and another Chinese toadstool light meets its maker at the hands of Big Clive. So tonight's video is sponsored by Gin and Tonic. I just thought I'd mention that since it's a weekend and it's quite enjoyable to have a little drink and take stuff to bits. So this is something I just again added to an order. I saw it in amongst a whole load of stuff being sold by an eBay seller and bought one, and the Chinglish on it is, I have to say, I almost introduced this as being a Disney product for some reason. I think it's because these flowers are that sort of pinky, yellowy, pastely colour and the sort of shape that just really makes me think of Disney for some reason. But this is not Disney for safety reasons primarily. So the instructions say, well, the box says, lighted 12 hours a day, only once a year. That's not very inspiring. Colourful, fantastic photoelectric switch. Well, I particularly like the colourful, fantastic photoelectric switches. This photoelectric switch isn't terribly colourful, but you know what? It's optimistic. More convenient branch knob set freely. Infinite originality LED light source. Power saving, durable, environmental. Simulated flowers, mushroom, more like potting. Decorated, used for lighting checks and balances. Okay, yeah, that'll do. They seem to do a few different types. The listing offered the orange one, which I kind of thought looked nicer, and the purple one, which just looks a wee bit duller, but you know, it's alright. Some people might prefer the colour purple. And there's this sort of, it strikes me as being an Irishy theme with this sort of cloverish, cloverleaf type things. So luck of the Irish to you. Except, to be honest, this is the blandest of the lot. It just doesn't look quite as good as others. But anyway, moving on. I've tried this, and it's the usual thing. You know, it's got the LEDs under these covers. It's got a white one under the yellow, a white one under the green, and the pink one has a colour changing LED under it. And sadly, unlike some of the other ones, it doesn't have the changeable LEDs. That seems to be a thing these days. I'm guessing maybe they had problems with people taking LEDs out and putting them in the wrong way round, or just leaving them out, or whatever. But the earliest versions of these, you could just swap LEDs in them, so you could have any colour you wanted. However, it does make up for that somewhat by having an exciting feature. And I found this out when I dropped it, and it just popped open, revealing the circuit board inside. And this bit is made of polystyrene, and it seems to just be wedged in, so it's not really the sort of thing you want to leave around kids. Well, obviously, like, I know this is very sort of commonly a sort of American type connector, and it's certainly the Chinese connector. But yeah, what I'm going to say, I think I prefer the traditional British sleeve connectors there. I recall being an American, noting that you could pull the plug out quite a bit, exposing live metal before the actual things went out, and I'm guessing most Americans have managed to stick their finger down the back of a plug at some point. However, let's open it up and take a look at the circuitry. Oop. Rogue LED makes an appearance. Oh, that's not actually going to go in there. So a couple of screws here. Not that you actually need them, you can just pull the thing apart apparently. And that reveals the circuit board inside, which at first glance, is that glued in or is it screwed in? Oh no, it's just jammed in. Okay, there's the little dropper capacitor. Let's take a wee look at the reading on that, what it is. 270 nanofarad, 400 volt. I can see the bridge rectifier. I'm guessing that this is probably working the same way that so many of these other ones do. That it's got a transistor there and the light sensor, and the transistor will probably just basically shunt out the LEDs. I think I may just pause and reverse engineer this and see what the circuitry is like. It looks as though it should be pretty typical. So I've duly reverse engineered it, and it's pretty typical of these things. It's got the capacitive dropper, which has the mains come in. It's got a 279 farad capacitor with a 1 megohm discharge resistor across it. It's got a 180 ohm resistor in series to limit inrush current. Not always needed when they use the electrolytic, but the output has this electrolytic capacitor across it. The string of 3 LEDs in series, each of the stems comes down to just basically, this is a sort of sleeving, and they've got a wire looping up and down them. Then it's got the transistor that shunts the LEDs out when there's enough light, and it's notable that this one is a S9015 transistor, which is PNP. So to actually turn it on, the PNP switches to the positive rail while the NPN switches to the negative rail. So the only difference between using an NPN transistor here is that if it had been NPN, they'd have swapped these two other resistors around. But as it is, they've got the transistor with its base being pulled down to the negative rail by a light-sensitive resistor here, and that means that when there's a lot of light, let me think. When the light's there, it's pulling it down, which turns that transistor on, and that shunts the LEDs. The lights go off during the day, and then when it's dark, it pulls the base of that transistor to the positive rail, and because it's PNP, that turns it off, and then that lets the LEDs come on. And then the only other odd thing is this 4.7k resistor. I've seen this in some of these lights before, and I'm not 100% sure what it's doing, but I do know that if the LEDs went open circuit for any reason, that would kind of, given that this passes about 20 milliamps, this would pass at that, it would have a voltage about 100 volts across it, which would limit, I suppose, damage to the circuitry a wee bit, I suppose. Not really sure the purpose of that. Certainly, if it did actually have 20 milliamps passing through it and it's 4.7k, it would be about 2 watts dissipation, which isn't that great for a quarter watt resistor. So I don't 100% know why they've got this here, this extra resistor. It seems kind of superfluous. Maybe, oh no, maybe not. I'm not really sure, because these other resistors are going to discharge the capacitor if when you unplug it from the wall, it's going to go out quite quickly. I don't know. I really don't know what that resistor there is for. Maybe it's just one that's included in other people's designs and they decide to include it too. So yeah, it's quite a smart little thing. Oh, I should mention that I got it from an eBay seller called, oh dear, it's one of those names. Trade 888. SZ Fuzzy, F-U-Z-I, Trade 888, and it's called Colours Changing LED Light Sensor Controls Flower Mushroom Home Decor. You know, it's one of these things. There's tons of these things on eBay. This is quite interesting though. They've kind of wrapped. Is that just painted? Maybe it is painted. But it's the polystyrene at the base, and it does have a wee notch, which is clearly designed to fit into this groove, but it just pops out quite easily. But they've flocked it as well. I think they've painted it with a glue maybe and then flocked it. But it's quite a good visual effect, and it's quite dense and sort of like the fake foliage, which you can shape to your desire. So yeah, it's a fairly nice one. It's all right as these things go. But I just wouldn't put it in a kid's bedroom, where they can just go and play with the flowers and it would just pull it off and expose the circuit board underneath. And just for completeness, here's some super iPad flicker vision. I have to say, because of that capacitor, there's no flicker that's visible. I mean, if I wave my finger in front of it, you can see a slight shimmer, but on the whole, this doesn't really flicker visibly. It's the iPad just picks the slightest ripple up. So when it's lit, it does look quite nice. It's quite bright. I suppose that's ultimately because it's driving the LEDs about 20 milliamps. It's ultra sensitive to light. If there's any light in the vicinity like this, it just instantly starts fading out. The fading is quite a nice feature actually, but that's just by default because the circuitry is so ultra simple that it just barely, at night it would just gradually come on like this. It would just fade in until it was up to full brightness. But it puts out a modest amount of light in the room. It's quite nice. So yes, kind of like this one actually. I like the fact that it's got these little sort of silicon rubber flowers and quite the dense foliage and the flocking. It just sort of means it's a wee bit sort of upmarket, if these things can be described as such.